Hello, how y'all doing today? My name is Bernie Thompson, and today we're here to take a look at this 2013 Hyundai Elantra. This Elantra has a problem with the smart entry key system. The shop has purchased 2 new keys from Hyundai. These are OE keys, but they cannot install them into this vehicle. So the first thing I want to do is I want to grab a scan tool and I want to get in and look at the basic DTCs and the parametric data. So let's go ahead and get that scan tool connected. Okay, so I got the scan tool and I've got it connected into the car. In order to connect the scan tool, I need to get the vehicle turned on. In order to turn the vehicle on, I can take the key that they've programmed. This is one of the 2 keys that they've got. And if I hold it right next to the button and I push the button with the key, I can get the car to read the key. Now, as what you guys need to understand is this key is not being read by a frequency that's being emitted as a radio frequency out of the fob. When I hold this right next to the button has an antenna behind it, and it puts out a very high voltage, and that voltage from the radio frequency enters the transponder, the chip that's inside the smart key, and it activates the transponder, and the transponder then sends the code into the system, and then the smart control system will send the EMO code out into the system so it allows the system to be turned on. But again, what we're worried about is the passive system, to where when we come up to the doors, the passenger door, the driver door, or the trunk, and I want to open it without actually having a key, this will allow that to happen. Additionally, by hitting the lock and unlock buttons, I have nothing happen. So basically, the radio frequencies that are within this unit are not functional. Remember, when you go push the button, I'm not using the radio, the transponder in this thing. The radio frequency is not being used. I am using the actual transponder chip, and it's being excited by a magnetic intensity that's coming out of the button, and then it's reading the code and then putting it into the vehicle system so we can start that system. So it's really important to understand that when I'm pushing on the button with the transponder, it only is reading the transponder with the magnetic intensity. When I'm using the buttons, or I walk up to the car, that's using a different part of this that's using a radio frequency that will be transmitted from this device, from the smart key. So the first thing I want to do is I want to come over and I want to get in smart key. And now I want to get into trouble codes. And basically we have no codes detected. So what this means is, it doesn't mean that I don't have a problem. It means that the calibration engineers that wrote the coding weren't looking for whatever problem that I'm having right now. That's all that means. We obviously have a problem because we have 2 keys from the dealer that they sent for this vehicle, and they gave them the VIN number on the car. So with 2 transponders, 2 keys, 2 smart keys, the problem must be in the car, or that's what we would think. But that may or may not be right. We need to actually see. So I want to go ahead and I want to get out of this, and I want to go to live data. Now, I've done quite a few of these cars, and for the type of problem that we're having where the smart key is not interacting with the system, a lot of times the data that's contained within the parametric data that we're looking at right here just isn't going to really help me to isolate where my problem is or what's wrong. Is this a transponder with 2 brand new transponders? You wouldn't think that's a very high probability. Or is that an antenna problem? But I have multiple antennas, so that's not a very good probability. The smart control, that might be a higher probability with having a problem with this vehicle. But we don't know that. So in order to diagnose this car, I really need to use a different method other than the factory scan information. Is what I want to do is I want to get a device that reads the key, and I want to get an oscilloscope. And with these 2 pieces, I can really quickly diagnose the system accurately. So let's go ahead and get the key device and a scope set up on this vehicle. Okay, I want to take the scope ground, and I want to always connect the scope ground to the negative post of the battery. The negative post is the lowest potential of the vehicle, and that will give me the best test results. This is the control module for the smart key entry system. It's located behind the glove box. The shop that's been working on this vehicle has already dropped this module down, so it was very easy for me to gain access to this module. The red and yellow are connected into the push button antenna, that's for the start system. The green lead is connected to the antenna by the shifter, and the blue lead is connected to the antenna in the console. This vehicle also has an antenna that's in the bumper, an antenna in the trunk, and the driver door has an antenna, and the passenger door has an antenna. The only antennas that we're in is the ring antenna for the push button, the shifter antenna, and the console antenna at this time. So now let's go ahead and bring this data up so we can try to figure out what's going on with this vehicle. Scope connected to this Elantra smart key entry system, as we've already seen. Now what I want to do is I want to check the car and the key, and I'm going to do that with my key device. So we're going to turn this on. And now when it comes up, what I want to do is I want to go down in the list, and I want to pick proximity full test. Now the full test is going to not only check the car, but it's going to check the key. So what this is going to do, this is telling me that the car sent a signal and the key responded to that signal. The megahertz down here is what we're reading, and that's what the key is responding at, and it's responding at 432 megahertz. The megahertz is how many times a second that will happen, and in the megahertz band, that band is in the FM band, like your radio would read. Microwaves, they read at the next level, which is billions of times a second, not million times a second. So in this system, this is an FM band that we're reading out of this radio transmission. So the car is sending a signal. We can see now that the car is sending the signal, and we can see that the key is capable of responding to the signal that the car sent, and it's sending its signal back. Now, in order to really see what's happening, let's look at this on a scope. So what I want to do is I want to bring my scope up. Now, the yellow and red is the antenna pulses from the push button antenna. The green and blue are from the shifter and console antenna. What I want to do is I want to blow this up just a little bit. And it's what we can see is we have a set of 3 signals and a set of 3 signals. Now right away, that signal structure is telling me something. It's telling me that this system went out and it looked for the key and it cannot find it. So in many structures on a car, such as ABS, the airbag, squibs, anchors, and so forth, these systems will send a signal. They're tests. It's going to test the system. And when it tests the system, is what it's going to do is if it passes, I only have 1 test. When it fails, I have 2 more tests. I do a series of 3. Whenever I see something where I'm trying to see a self-test, and when I see 3 pulses, to me, that's telling me by rule of thumb that I'm failing the first test, and then I've continued and I tested 2 more times. Like if you're in transmission solenoids, for instance, when I first turn the key on, the transmission module will turn those solenoids, the A, B, C, D solenoids, on and off. And if one of them fails, it will turn them on 2 more times, and then it shuts the TCM, depowers those solenoids so they can't operate because it knows one of them is faulty. Again, this is a set of 3 tests. So when I see a system run 3 tests, to me it's telling me it failed. So right away on this vehicle, we can see that we have 3 tests run. And we can also see that the test structure changed. Let me show you what I mean. Do you see how I can see that I've got a green and a blue and a green and a blue? The blue is missing on the last one. I'm going to turn the green antenna off, which is the shifter antenna. These are the console antennas, and the console and the shifter antenna have a transmission output at the same time. So these are transmission outputs. Now they're transmitting out and they're looking for the key. Now we know the key is responding to this message, but by a series of 3 tests and a change in the test, I know that this system can't see this key. For whatever reason, the system is not seeing the key. The key is transmitting, but the smart control module cannot see the transmission from the key. Now the transmission is going to be sent out from the smart key, and that's this. And what we got is that's what these are. Now these are from the push button, the antenna around the push button. Now I want to make a note here. Do you see how this is 60 volts? Well, how big we are is how much energy we're pushing through our antenna system. The bigger the amplitude, the more power is being generated. Notice that these are only going up to 30 volts. Well, these 30 volt signals out of the interior antennas and the bumper, trunk, and the 2 door antennas will be a much smaller voltage out because these are close prox antennas. They only want to pick up the smart key when you're about 3 to 4 feet away from the antenna. So if I'm way away in the parking lot, these antennas don't want to pick up the smart key. These are close proximity devices. So that being said, we can see the difference in amplitude. Now the reason that the antenna is sending out so much energy on the push button is because it's going to need to excite the key and the circuit in the key so it can read it. And that's why this is so large. And you can see that we have 60 plus and minus. So this is a large output from the antenna. And it's really not that big of an output for antennas as far as antennas go. But for the car, for this particular car and the systems we're looking at, we can see the different voltage and we understand now why it's that way. And again, when we see the key, we see 3 strikes because it cannot read the key. Now again, I have the key out blinking right now. So now I want to show you the next test. We're going to take the key out of our device and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shut this off for right now. We've already know that the key is fully functional. Now if we see the key flashing, I want to hold the key, and what we want to do right here is we're going to watch, and when I hold the key next to that, do you see how small it got? This is 3 strikes or 3 transmissions, and this is 1 transmission. And now the key stopped blinking. Now when the key stops blinking, it's because it's reading the key and it knows the key is in the vehicle, but it's reading it through the antenna around the push button, not through the antennas around the vehicle. And that would be the antennas at the passenger door, driver door, bumper, trunk, console, and shifter antennas. We're only in the shifter and console, but they'll all be very similar in their nature. So again, I'm going to take the key away, and we're going to see right away. Do you see how we had 2 rather than we have 1 and then we have 3. So over here we have 3 transmissions. Now we go back over here and I can see I only have 1 transmission. Now when we look at this waveform, we can see that again we have 3. Now the nature of these again is changing, and we can see that again by we turn this off and we see the 2 blue. This is the console antenna, and the shifter antenna has another one. It is looking for the device and it cannot find the device. So what we want to do is we want to look at these little packages right here. Now this is the transmitted message, and is what we're going to see is this is the radio frequency that's going out the antenna. Now I want to be clear that this is not a real representation of what's occurring. Obviously we just saw that this transmission is at 400 megahertz. Now that's a really fast speed. No automotive scope would read this. You're going to need a 5 billion time per second or 10 billion time per second to read this message correctly. But I don't need to read it correctly because I'm not looking at the data. All I need to know is the antenna has the possibility and the amplitude. So what this is showing me is it's going to show me that the antenna is sending a message, and it's going to show me that the message is being transmitted. Let me show you what I mean. So what I want to do is I want to go to this, and we can see how these antennas are reading at different, like we have sharp cuts. This is the transmission, and this is a modulated signal. A modulated signal means that I'm carrying information on the signal. An unmodulated radio frequency would be something like a microwave. There's no information being sent. On this system, we can clearly see that we have some information that's being sent in this packet, in this information. Now, if we go back out, again, we can start to come in here and we can zoom in on these, and we'll see a similar structure, and these again are radio transmissions, and it's telling me that the antennas are fully functional. So that's sort of what we're doing, and we can come over here and we can also blow this one up, and we'll see that we have a very similar nature in our waveform. And this is just telling me that the smart control can work and the antenna can work because I have amplitude. That's how much power I'm pushing out of the antenna. And this is a message, and we can sort of see how this message is being constructed here, and we can see that there's definitely on-off signals, and again, these are not real because our speed is way too slow. Again, we would need a 5 to 10 gig a sample scope in order to read these correctly, but at least I have a system to where I can see that the antenna is functional, and I can see the amplitude or the voltage that's being sent out to force that signal out into the air so I could be read by my transmitter, and then this transmitter is going to send a signal back. And so this is both a transceiver. It can transmit and receive as the smart module can. And so this is what we know. So let's look at the data that we've acquired so far. We know that the antenna can see the car, and it can respond to the car with 432 megahertz of frequency. We know that the car's antenna is seeing it, and we know that something's wrong between this and the module because the module does not read the key. It's looking for the key repetitively. These 3 strikes tells me that it's looking for the key. As we've already shown, and we'll show this again, we see the 3 strikes. If I hold the key right up to the button, and it will start to read the transponder to where it knows I have 1 strike, not 3. Again, I'm going to move it back and I have 3. It immediately will start testing, and it's looking for the key again because it can't see it. We're not close enough for that antenna to read the transponder out here without it being right next to it, to excite the transponder so it can send the coding into the vehicle. So this key, I don't think this key is the right key. Even though it came from the dealer, the Hyundai dealer, and this is an OE key, there's something wrong. So what I want to do is I want to go out in my car and I want to get a book on keys so I can figure out what's going on here. But I'm going to need additional information to make a judgment. But right now, everything in this car tells me that this is the wrong key for this particular vehicle, even though this came from the dealer. And that doesn't always matter. Guys, always be really careful. It really doesn't matter if you have a new part, and it doesn't matter if you have got multiple new parts. It might not be the right part for the car, or it might have been manufactured incorrectly. But something's wrong with the key, I believe. So let me go get my book, and then let's take a look at the data from that. Okay, so I've got my key book, and this was written by Michael Hyde, and this is a great book. So what I want to do is I want to come in and I want to find my key, and this is the key right here, and we can see that that key is this one right here, and it says that that key is going to read at 433 megahertz, and that's basically what we have. But what I want to show you is this is for an Elantra, and it's a 2013 to 2017 Elantra, but it's a coupe or a GT. Well, we have a 4-door. We don't have a coupe. So when I go back and I look for my car, what I'm actually got is I've got a 2011 to 2013 Elantra 4-door. I have a 13 4-door. Well, this this transponder, do you see how these don't match? None of these transponders are this one. These are different transponders. And they're going to read at 315 megahertz. So the hertz reading is the wrong reading for this device. So that being said, this key is never going to work in this vehicle. This is the wrong key for the car. So what we need to do is we need to get this key, and then we need to get this key programmed into the car, and then I would like to show you what the differences are and how the car interacts with the keys in the entry systems of the car, and how it's going to pick it up, and how you can see if we have a problem or not with these type of systems. So I need to go get a key, and I need to get back so I can program it, and then I want to show you guys just a couple of more things with the smart key systems. So let me go pick up a key and I'll be back shortly. So I went over and I got the right key. We can see the differences in the key. Physically, they look different, but more than the physical key, these are sending out two different frequencies. The frequency is the sine wave and how close together they are. And this has a slower frequency and this has a higher frequency. So the frequency that these send is picked up by an antenna, but the antennas are made for the frequency that's being sent. That means that I'm not sure if these frequencies are far enough apart to require a different antenna mechanism, but it could be. They're probably close enough to where they're reading them in the same antenna. But always remember that the different frequencies, the antenna is tuned for the frequency. Now that we have this set up and it's set for the car, I can see that I can go ahead and I can push the button and it works. The other thing I want to show you is on the scope. Notice how I have a single transmission. Now I have a single transmission, a single transmission, a single transmission. Notice that we don't have three. That's because the key is being read by the car, the antenna, and it's sending out a message that the antenna is picking up, and so the smart entry control system now knows that the correct key is in the car. This is pulsing these two antennas so it can figure out if it's in the car or if it's out of the car. Now right now we can see that the light is out and we can see that this key continually looks. Now the reason that this is looking is because I have the door open. If I close the door, it will stop looking for the key because these last transmissions tell this, due to the proximity and the amplitudes, that this key is present and it's inside the car. Now, if I open up the door, it's going to immediately start to look for the key, and it knows the key is here now. Now, we can see that it knows. Now, I'm going to show you because I'm going to take this key and I need it further than 3 feet basically away from the car. So let's go ahead and accomplish that. Immediately, 3 pulses, and it starts looking with the antenna. See how I had 1? That tells me the key is present and it knows the key is in the car. When I have 3 strikes, it's looking for it, and then it backed up. It's looking for the key again with the ignition button. This is telling me that it can't see the key. Now once again, if we have this type of a transmission, I can take the other key, the wrong key, but was programmed with the transponder correctly, and you'll see immediately that it goes to 1 transmission message. If I take it away, it goes to 3 transmission messages. And again, we've already seen this, but we can see the difference right here, that this is 1 and this is 3. So that's how this is actually in operation. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and get that key and watch it come back into the car. As soon as it sees it into the car, we immediately stop transmitting with the key button, and now it's reading the smart key with the interior antennas, and it knows that that key is present now or not present. So now is what I want to do, that we have the key set up. I want to go ahead and I want to get into the driver door antenna, and I want to look at those signals, and we want to see how this is going to interact to allow me to lock and unlock the doors from the passive control on the driver latch. So let me go ahead and move the scope. Okay, so we have the doors closed and the system is off. The key, I'm holding it outside below the window level, and it's what I want to do is I want to unlock the door. So we're going to push the button, and now I want to show you what happened. And it went ahead and unlocked the door to allow access through the passive system. Now, this is real interesting on how it operates. Notice how it sends a signal out looking for the smart key, and that's done with the two antennas that are inside the car. That is the console and the shifter antenna, and then the red and yellow is now connected to the door antenna. So this is in the driver door. Now, do you see how this is? It's checking to see if that key is in or outside the car. So now it's going to go ahead and it will lock the door or unlock the door. Now is what I want to do is I want to go ahead and we want to do the same thing, but now we're going to lock the door. So now this is the door being locked with the smart antenna. So now I checked it inside to see if the key was remaining inside. This is a secondary check to test the key, whether it's in or out, and then I check it with the antenna again inside, and then I check the door, and now it knows the key is outside, so it will lock the door. Now is what I want to do is I want to have the key inside, and I want to lock the door. I'm going to try to lock the door. And now you can hear the alarm on the outside, and notice it did not check the door because it knows the key is inside the car, so the door antenna was never activated to double check if the key is outside before it allows it to lock. And again, we're going to do this again. So I'm going to kick the key. Now I'm going to move the key outside by the lock, and we can see the difference. Immediately it checked both antennas inside the car, and again it's checking to see if that antenna or the smart key is in or outside the car. It checked it, and now it knows it's not inside, and then it checks the door handle and it knows it's outside, so it allowed the door to lock. Now I want to do something else. We want to go ahead and we want to have the key on, or we're going to power the dash. And now is what I want to do is I want to try to lock it with the door latch again with the key on. Now notice that look at what it did now. You could hear the audible alarm. Now it checks it, but it won't allow the door to lock. And again, we're going to try this again. Did not lock the door. So now I'm going to take and we're going to shut off the ignition. Now it locked the door. Now you can see the difference in the way the messages are arranged and what's happening here. So this is the way that the key is going to work if it's correct. Now is what I want to do is I want to get the key away from the car, and we're going to take the wrong key. Now this is the key that doesn't work with this car. It's on the wrong frequency. However, being a brand new key, it's just the wrong key for the car. I'm going to hold it outside the window and I'm going to push the button. Now look at the difference in the messaging. It checked outside twice. So now it checked the response from the smart key, from the interior antennas, then the outside antenna. Now this is very similar to the correct antenna, right? What's different is it checked the antenna again outside, and then it checks the inside. Again, this is a test that's trying to see where it is in space. Is it inside? Is it outside? They're trying to make sure that if the key is present and they misread it possibly, radio transmissions can have obstacles and so on in their path. They want to make sure that they're trying to see this again. So again, I'm going to push the button again, and we're trying to lock the door. Now we can see that message. Now I'm going to lock the door, and now we're going to see what we get. Now do you see the difference? I'm trying to open the door. Now to open the door, we have a similar message to where we check the inside antennas, then I check the outside, in here, and it failed to do anything because the key is the wrong key. This key is just got the wrong megahertz for the vehicle that we're working on. Now this can be a very, very confusing car. When you get keys and you get them from the OE, you're assuming that it's for surely right, and when you call and they double check and they tell you that that's the key for the car, well, now we pull the dash and we start looking at modules and so on. And I mean, this is great that he had it down because it makes it really easy for me to get into this stuff so I can demonstrate the system and how I work on these cars. And some of these security systems and smart keys can be very difficult problems. This isn't one of them, but I've had some really hard cars. So what I wanted to show you is there's a way by looking at the inputs and what the output is going to do, just like we do on all systems. The input is reading the key. The outputs are what it's doing to try to see the key and what's happening around this. So this is a real quick look at just some of the stuff a smart key is going to do. Hopefully, you get the whole idea of this test, and that is how you do testing and how you think through it analytically. How do you bring up a test? I mean, how am I going to test this car when I know the key is right? It came from the dealer. You have to have another plan, and the factory scan tool is not going to find this problem for you. You're going to be replacing modules and so on. So rather than that, this is the structure that I've laid out here using a scope and a key reader. This really works, and it works very effectively. If you do an analytical approach, you understand the data that you're testing, and you let that drive your next test, and you have good tools and information, you'll have great troubleshooting in your shops.